It started with a trembling child holding a crumpled painting, and ended with 32 roaring engines outside a hospital where justice had been silenced too long. Hold up, before this story starts, I need to know, where are you watching from and what time is it? Drop your city in the comments. And listen, if the bravery of this child matters to you, hit subscribe right now. Now let's get into the story. The Florida sun didn't forgive. It beat down on cracked asphalt like a hammer on an anvil, turning the air thick enough to choke on. Heat shimmered off rusted chain-link fences and peeling paint, distorting the world into something that looked half real, half mirage. This part of town didn't make it into postcards. It was the kind of street where hope came to die quietly, where broken dreams collected in gutters alongside cigarette butts and crushed beer cans. And there, beneath all that unforgiving heat, stood a child. 7 years old. Barefoot. Her toes dusty against concrete that could burn skin. Mia Jones clutched a piece of paper between small, trembling hands, a painting if you could call it that. Watercolor stains bled into crayon strokes, colors mixing where they shouldn't, the kind of art that only a child's desperation could create. A house. A stick-figure woman lying down. Dark clouds overhead. It wasn't pretty, but it was hers. Her voice cracked when she spoke, barely louder than the buzz of flies circling a nearby dumpster. "Sir, will you buy my painting?" The words hung in the thick air, fragile as spun glass. A man in a stained tank top walked past without looking. A woman with a grocery bag crossed the street, eyes down. The world kept moving, indifferent to the small girl and her wrinkled masterpiece. Then came the sound. Low. Guttural. A rumble that started somewhere deep in the earth and rose until it filled the street like a living thing. The growl of engines, not one but many, rolling thunder on two wheels. The Bandidos Florida chapter. 7 Harleys, chrome glinting like knives under the sun, rolled down the broken street in a tight formation. Leather vests worn soft from years of road dust. Patches that told stories most people didn't want to hear. Men with faces carved from hard miles and harder choices. Leading them was Sean Bulldog McKenna, 53 years old. Beard streaked with gray. Eyes that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. A scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, a souvenir from Fallujah that he never talked about. His hands, scarred and calloused, gripped the handlebars of a road king that had carried him through 2 divorces, 3 states, and 1 daughter's funeral. He didn't believe in God anymore, but he believed in the road. The formation moved like a machine, practiced and precise, until, "Sir, please." The child's voice cut through the engine roar like a blade through silk. Sean's head snapped toward the sound. His right hand dropped, engine idling down to a low purr. Behind him, 6 more bikes slowed, confused. Thuram, built like a linebacker, tattoos crawling up his neck, raised an eyebrow. Enzo, the cruise medic and tech guy, killed his engine entirely. Mia stepped forward, her painting held up like an offering to indifferent gods. "Will you buy my painting? Mommy's been stooling for 2 days." The words landed wrong. Too innocent for the brutality they carried. Stooling. A child's word for something no child should have to name. Sean's jaw tightened. He swung his leg off the bike, boots hitting pavement with a thud that seemed too loud in the sudden quiet. The other men followed, forming a semicircle of leather and steel around the small girl who didn't flinch. She should have been afraid. Most kids ran from men like them. But fear was a luxury for children who had options. Sean knelt slowly, leather creaking, until he was eye level with Mia. Up close, he could see the desperation etched into her small face, the hollow cheeks, the dirt under her fingernails, the way her lips were cracked from dehydration. "Where's your mama, sweetheart?" His voice came out softer than he intended. Mia's arm trembled as she pointed toward a house 20 feet away. The screen door hung crooked on one hinge. A window was covered with cardboard and duct tape. From inside came a sound that made every man present go still. A moan. Weak. Broken. The sound of someone losing a fight they didn't know they were in. "She's in there," Mia whispered. "She won't wake up right." I tried giving her water, but her voice cracked. 7 years old, and she was already apologizing for things that weren't her fault. Sean's hand curled into a fist. Not at the child. Never at the child. But at whatever cosmic cruelty had put her here, on this street, holding a painting like it was a life raft. Behind him, Thuram muttered something low in Spanish. Enzo pulled out his phone, already searching for something. Hospital contacts, maybe, or poison control. The crew knew the drill. They'd all seen suffering before. Stepped over it. Ridden past it. But something about this moment felt different. Maybe it was the painting. Maybe it was the way the little girl's eyes held too much understanding for someone who should still believe in fairy tales. Maybe it was the fact that Sean saw his own daughter's face superimposed over Mia's, Emma, who died at 6 because the VA hospital had turned them away 3 times before her fever spiked past the point of no return. He stood slowly, his shadow falling over the child like a promise. Thuram. Enzo. Check inside. Careful. His voice had shifted. No longer soft. Command, honed by years of leading men through situations where hesitation meant death. The 2 men moved without question, boots crunching on the walkway littered with dead leaves and bottle caps. Sean pulled a radio from his belt, thumb pressing the call button. Static crackled, then cleared. Bulldog to all chapters. His voice was granite. We ride tonight. Somebody's gonna answer for this. The radio crackled back with affirmatives. Questions. But Sean didn't explain. Not yet. He looked down at Mia, who still held her painting up, hopeful despite everything. Keep that safe, kid, he said quietly. You might need it. She didn't understand. Not yet. But she would. The house swallowed them whole. Inside, the air was different. Thicker. Wrong. It clung to skin like oil, carrying the sharp tang of ammonia mixed with something sweeter, something that made Thuram's nose wrinkle in disgust. Medicine. Stale bread left too long in humid heat. And underneath it all, the unmistakable sour rot of spoiled food. Sean's eyes adjusted slowly to the dimness. Curtains drawn. A single lamp flickering in the corner, its bulb threatening to die. Shadows pooled in places where light should have been, making the small living room feel like a cave. On a worn couch that had seen better decades, Annabella Jones lay motionless. She was young, mid-30s maybe, but suffering had aged her in ways that years couldn't. Her skin, naturally a warm brown, had gone ashen, pale beneath the undertones like someone had drained the life from her veins. Sweat soaked through a faded yellow nightgown. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, irregular gasps. Each breath seemed like it might be her last. Mia knelt beside her mother with a piece of cardboard, fanning the air in small, desperate movements. The cardboard was decorated with crayon drawings, flowers, hearts, stick figures holding hands. A child's attempt to make something hopeful from garbage. "Mommy," Mia whispered, her voice so soft it almost disappeared. "I'll get help. I promise. The nice men are here." Annabella's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. Sean moved forward, his boots heavy on the stained carpet. He dropped to one knee beside the couch, fingers finding Annabella's wrist. Her pulse was there, barely. Thread-thin and irregular, like Morse code from a dying radio. "Jesus," Thuram breathed from behind him. "How long?" Sean asked without looking up. Mia's fan stopped moving. 2 days. She got real sick after she came home from work. She was throwing up and then she just stopped waking up good. Sean's jaw worked silently. He'd seen this before. Afghanistan. Iraq. The way bodies shut down when poison moved through the bloodstream. The way suffering became something mechanical, predictable. He closed his eyes for a heartbeat, and the room shifted. Flashback. Annabella Jones, standing in a community kitchen with fluorescent lights humming overhead. Younger. Vibrant. Smiling despite the exhaustion carved into the corners of her eyes. A hairnet barely contained her braids. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, ladling soup into bowls for a line of people who'd come for free meals. An older man nodded gratefully. A woman with 2 children whispered, "God bless." Annabella smiled wider, the kind of smile that came from genuine goodness, the kind that made people believe the world wasn't entirely cruel. Behind her, a voice cut through the warmth like January wind. "You think you're special?" Annabella turned. The smile faltered. Maggie Geilinghall. 40-something. Blonde hair pulled back so tight it made her face look skeletal. Designer clothes that didn't belong in a charity kitchen. Eyes that held all the warmth of a snake watching prey. I see the way they look at you, Maggie sneered, stepping closer. Like you're some kind of saint. But I know what you did. Mrs. Geilinghole, I don't. Don't play innocent. The charity fund money. Someone's been skimming. And you're the only one who had access. Annabella's face went pale. I would never. Save it. Maggie's smile was all teeth, no joy. You're done here. And I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of thief you are. The memory fractured like glass. Present. Sean's eyes snapped open. On the floor beside the couch, half hidden under a blanket, sat a plastic container. Soup. The same kind Annabella had been serving in his vision, his mind connecting dots it didn't want to acknowledge. He reached for it carefully, lifting it into the dim light. The soup inside had congealed, separated. The smell made his stomach turn. Enzo. Sean's voice cracked like a whip. Footsteps thundered. Enzo appeared in the doorway, medical kit already in hand. The man had been a combat medic before the banditos, had saved lives in places where death was the default. His eyes swept the scene in seconds. Vitals? Enzo asked, dropping beside Annabella. Weak pulse. Shallow breathing. Unresponsive. Sean held up the container. And this. Enzo's expression went dark. He took the container, brought it close to his face, then recoiled. That's not food poisoning. That's poisoning. The words hung in the stale air like a death sentence. Thuram moved to the window, peering through the gap in the curtains as if expecting someone to be watching. His hand instinctively went to his belt where a knife stayed hidden. Who would do this to her? Mia's small voice answered, so quiet they almost missed it. Miss Maggie. She said Mommy stole from her. But Mommy only cooked for free. Sean's head turned slowly toward the child. The pieces were assembling themselves into something uglier than he'd imagined. Not random. Not an accident. Deliberate. He stood, the container still in his hand, and something in his chest twisted. It was the same feeling he'd had the night Emma died, when the hospital turned them away for the third time, when bureaucracy murdered his daughter as surely as any weapon. His jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. Enzo, stabilize her. Do whatever you have to. Sean's voice had gone flat. Dangerous. The voice he used before pulling triggers. Thuram, get on the horn. I want every brother within 50 miles here within the hour. Sean, Thuram started. Now. Thuram nodded and disappeared. Sean looked down at the soup container in his hand, then at Annabella's barely breathing form, then at little Mia with her cardboard fan and her crayon flowers. His knuckles went white around the plastic. Whoever did this, he said, and the words came out like gravel scraping concrete, will wish they hadn't. Mia tugged on Sean's vest. The leather was worn smooth, decorated with patches that told stories in symbols she couldn't read. Her small fingers barely made an impression on the heavy fabric, but Sean felt it like an electric shock. He turned, and the little girl was already digging into her school bag, a pink backpack covered in faded unicorn stickers, the kind you'd find in a dollar store clearance bin. I have something, she whispered. The room went still. Even Enzo paused mid-examination, his gloved hands hovering over Annabella's wrist. Thuram shifted his weight, boots creaking on old floorboards. Outside, engines idled like patient predators. Mia pulled out the painting first. Sean had seen it on the street, the wrinkled paper she'd been trying to sell. But now, in the dim lamplight, with context bleeding into every brushstroke, it became something else entirely. Something that made his breath catch. The house, rendered in shaky crayon lines. A stick-figure woman lying on a couch, yellow dress, brown skin, eyes closed. Standing over her, another figure. Taller. Blonde hair like yellow scribbles. White clothes. And in the blonde woman's hands, a pot. A spoon. Dark swirls rising from it like smoke. Or poison. Jesus Christ, Thuram breathed. Mia's finger traced the blonde figure. That's Miss Maggie. She came to our house 3 days ago. Her voice was matter-of-fact, the way children speak when they don't yet understand the weight of what they're saying. She brought Mommy soup. Said it was an apology for being mean at work. Sean's hands curled into fists. And your mama ate it? Enzo asked gently. Mia nodded. She was hungry. We didn't have much food, and Miss Maggie said, her voice caught. She said it was homemade. Special. The little girl reached back into her bag. This time, she pulled out something wrapped in a plastic grocery bag. Inside was a soup container, different from the one on the floor. Smaller. And critically, still half full. Mommy only ate some, Mia said. She said it tasted funny, but she didn't want to be rude. I saved the rest because... She looked down. Because we might need it later. For dinner. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, dense with rage barely contained, with dawning horror, with a terrible understanding that this child had been holding evidence of her mother's murder and didn't even know it. Enzo moved first. He took the container with gloved hands like it was a live grenade, holding it up to the light. The soup inside had separated into layers, oil on top, chunks at the bottom, and something else. Something that shimmered wrong. I need to test this, he said. Now. Sean couldn't look away from the painting. A 7-year-old had documented an attempted murder in watercolor and crayon, had watched poison delivered with a smile, had created evidence that could destroy a killer, and she'd done it by accident, just trying to process what her young mind couldn't comprehend. Mia. Sean knelt again, his voice scraped raw. Did Miss Maggie say anything else? Anything at all? The girl's eyes went distant, remembering. She told Mommy to stop talking about the charity money. Said Mommy was making trouble. That if Mommy kept asking questions, bad things would happen. Her bottom lip trembled. Is Mommy going to die because she asked questions? Mia's painting. The soup. The blacklist. All of it connected by a single thread, a woman who tried to kill someone, then made sure the person couldn't get help. Sean's voice dropped to something subterranean, something that came from a place where mercy didn't live. She's being killed twice, he said. First with poison, then with lies. Enzo looked up from his testing kit, holding a strip that had turned a color it shouldn't. Arsenic. Low dose, but consistent. This wasn't meant to kill fast. It was meant to look like illness. Natural causes. Thuram's fist hit the wall hard enough to crack plaster. That's murder. That's premeditated murder, Enzo corrected. Sean stood slowly, the phone still pressed to his ear. Kendra, I need you to make some calls. Get Annabella cleared. Get her into Baylite Hospital under emergency admission. Use whatever names you have to. Sean, if I do this, people are going to ask questions. Let them ask. His voice was stone. This woman's got a 7-year-old daughter who just watched her die slowly because some rich bitch wanted to cover up embezzlement. Kendra was quiet for a moment. Then, I'll make the calls. But Sean, be careful. People who can blacklist across multiple hospitals have serious reach. So do I. He hung up. The bikers stood in formation now, a silent council of leather and steel. They'd all heard enough. Seen the painting. Seen the soup. Seen a child's innocence weaponized into evidence. Sean picked up Mia's painting, holding it carefully. In the corner, barely visible, she'd signed her name in crooked letters. Mia Jones, age 7. He looked at Thuram, then Enzo, then at the door where more brothers were gathering, engines rumbling like distant thunder. Get Annabella stabilized for transport, he said quietly. Then we ride. Where to? Thuram asked. Sean's eyes were cold as winter steel. To find out what happens when you try to murder someone and their story gets told anyway. The air conditioning hummed at exactly 72 degrees. Maggie Geilinghol's office existed in a different world than the house where Annabella lay dying. Marble floors. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Tampa. A desk made from reclaimed mahogany that cost more than most people earned in a year. Everything here whispered money, power, control. Maggie sat behind that desk, perfectly manicured nails tapping across her phone screen. Her blonde hair caught the afternoon light, styled into waves that required $200 of salon work every week. Diamond studs in her ears. A Cartier watch on her wrist. The uniform of someone who'd convinced the world she cared about the poor while bleeding them dry. She scrolled through her social media feed, and then she saw it. A photo. Grainy. Taken from a distance. A small black girl standing on a cracked sidewalk, holding up a painting. The caption read, "Please help, Mama is sick." Maggie's lips curved into something that might have been a smile on a different face. On hers, it looked reptilian. "Ashley," she called out. Her assistant appeared in the doorway, young, eager, wearing the desperate expression of someone who needed this job too badly to question anything. "Come look at this." Ashley approached, peering at the phone screen. "The beggar's spawn," Maggie said, her voice dripping with amusement. "Still trying to sell that pathetic art. Maybe now she'll learn her place." She set the phone down. "Some people need to understand that when you bite the hand that feeds you, you starve." Ashley's smile was uncertain, uncomfortable. But she nodded. She always nodded. Maggie returned to her computer, pulling up a draft press release. Gailenghole Community Outreach Foundation raises $50,000 for homeless families. Complete fiction, of course. The money would go into her accounts, filtered through enough shell companies that no auditor would ever trace it. She'd been doing this for 3 years. Taking donations meant for the hungry, the homeless, the desperate. And when Annabella Jones, stupid righteous Annabella, started asking questions about missing funds, about receipts that didn't add up, Maggie had to act. The soup had been elegant, untraceable, slow-acting. And the blacklist? That was just insurance. Her phone buzzed. She answered without checking the caller ID. "It's done," a male voice said. "Good." Maggie's tone was businesslike. "And the hospital networks?" "All flagged. She won't get treatment anywhere in the state." "Perfect." She ended the call. What Maggie didn't know was that 15 miles away, in a warehouse that smelled of motor oil and old leather, her perfect crime was unraveling. Enzo's laptop sat on a workbench surrounded by engine parts and coffee cups. His fingers flew across the keyboard, lines of code scrolling faster than most people could read. Around him, 6 banditos stood watching screens like they were preparing for war. Because they were. "Got it," Enzo muttered. "Gailenghole Community Outreach Foundation, main server. Their security is garbage for a charity handling this much money." "How much?" Thuram asked. "They claim to have processed $2.3 million in donations over 3 years. Enzo pulled up a spreadsheet. "But look at the actual disbursements. Food programs got 12,000. Shelter assistance got 8,000. Medical aid got nothing." He scrolled further. The rest vanished into administrative costs. Sean leaned closer. The numbers made his jaw clench. Administrative costs that bought luxury cars. Consulting fees that paid for vacation homes. Marketing expenses that funded a lifestyle while children went hungry. "Pull the receipts," he said. Enzo clicked through folders. Photos appeared on screen. Maggie at charity events, smiling beside donation boxes. Maggie presenting oversized checks for cameras. And then, buried in a protected folder, photos of Maggie at a casino. Maggie boarding a yacht. Maggie signing papers at a real estate office. All time-stamped within weeks of major donation drives. "She's pocketing it," Thuram breathed. "All of it." "Not all," Enzo corrected. "She's smart. She gives just enough to look legitimate. But yeah, most of it? Gone. And Annabella must have figured it out." Sean's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. "Trey Jones?" the voice asked. "Wrong number," Sean started to say, but then he heard it, Maggie's voice in the background, that same condescending tone. He put the call on speaker. "Telling you as a courtesy, Mr. Jones. Your ex-wife has been stealing from the charity. We've given her multiple chances, but she's become erratic. Possibly drugs. I'm worried about your daughter's safety." Trey's voice came through, confused and angry. "Annabella wouldn't. I know it's hard to accept, but we have documentation. I think Mia should be with you until Annabella gets help." The line went dead. Sean stood motionless, rage building like pressure behind a dam. She wasn't just killing Annabella. She was destroying her reputation, turning her daughter's father against her, preparing to tear that family apart even after the poison did its work. Thuram picked up a wrench and slammed it against the workbench hard enough to leave a dent. "Easy," Sean said quietly. But his own hands were shaking. Enzo switched screens. "Look at this." The local news website. Breaking story. Geilenghol Foundation launches emergency campaign for sick children. Maggie's face filled the frame, eyes glistening with performative tears, explaining how every dollar would save lives. The fundraising goal, $100,000. The real destination, Maggie's pocket. Sean watched the video twice. Watched her manipulate emotions, weaponize sympathy, perform goodness while planning murder. He thought about Emma. About hospital administrators who'd valued profit over his daughter's life. About every system that protected predators and punished the vulnerable. His brothers waited. They knew that look. They'd seen it before battles, before decisions that changed everything. Sean's voice came out low, controlled, lethal. If the law won't touch her, we will, the right way. What's the right way? Thuram asked. Sean's eyes never left the screen where Maggie smiled her plastic smile. We make her face what she's done. Every lie. Every stolen dollar. Every life she's destroyed. He turned to face his crew. We put her crimes in the light where the whole world can see them. And we make damn sure Annabella lives to watch justice happen. Enzo closed his laptop. When do we move? Sean checked his watch. Outside, more engines were arriving. The brothers had heard the call. They were gathering. An army of leather and chrome, preparing to wage war without firing a single shot. Soon, Sean said. Very soon. Annabella's breathing changed at 9:47 p.m. Enzo heard it first, the shift from shallow and irregular to something worse, something that sounded like drowning on dry land. He was checking her vitals when her chest hitched, stuttered, and for 3 terrible seconds, stopped completely. She's crashing. His hands moved on instinct, fingers finding her pulse point. Sean, we're out of time. She needs a hospital. Now. The house erupted into controlled chaos. Sean was already moving toward the door, barking orders into his radio. All chapters, converge on my location. We're moving a patient to Baylight. I want every brother who can ride here in 5 minutes. Thuram lifted Annabella with surprising gentleness for hands that had broken jaws and bent steel. She was too light, her body wasted by poison and dehydration. Her head lolled against his shoulder, unconscious, barely there. I've got her, he said. Where am I putting her? Sidecar. Sean pointed to his Harley, where a custom sidecar sat, originally built for long hauls, now about to become an ambulance. Enzo rides with her. Keeps her stable. Mia appeared in the doorway, her painting still clutched in one hand, tears streaming down her face. Is Mommy dying? The question hit harder than any punch. Sean knelt fast, eye level with the child whose world was collapsing. Not tonight, sweetheart. Not on our watch. He looked at Thuram. She rides with me. Front seat. Outside, the street had transformed. What had been 7 bikes an hour ago was now an army. They rolled in from every direction. Bandidos from Tampa, from Clearwater, from St. Pete. Engines rumbled like approaching thunder, chrome glinting under streetlights, leather and patches and the brotherhood that answered when one of their own called. 32 Harleys lined the broken street. Enzo climbed into the sidecar beside Annabella, his medical kit wedged between his legs, one hand constantly monitoring her pulse. Thuram secured her with straps meant for cargo, now repurposed to keep a dying woman from falling. Sean lifted Mia onto his bike, settling her in front of him where she could hold the handlebars. Her small hands barely wrapped around the grips. Hold tight, kid, he said. Don't let go. She nodded, too scared to speak. Sean raised his hand. Every engine revved in unison, a symphony of controlled violence, of power waiting to be unleashed. Then his hand dropped. They moved as one. The formation was precise, practiced. Lead bikes flanked Sean's Harley, creating a protective barrier around the sidecar. More bikes fell in behind, 2 abreast, stretching down the street like a mechanical serpent. The sound was overwhelming, not just noise, but a statement. A declaration. We are here. Step aside. They tore through Tampa at 70 miles per hour, running red lights with impunity, not because they were lawless but because seconds mattered. Cars pulled over, drivers staring wide-eyed as the bandidos roared past. Some people filmed on their phones. Others just watched, mesmerized by the sight of 32 bikers moving with military precision. Above them, A news drone caught the footage. The anchor's voice would play later. Unconfirmed reports of a biker gang escorting what appears to be a medical emergency through downtown Tampa. Authorities are investigating. But right now, there was only the road. The wind. The desperate race against death. Mia's hands tightened on the handlebars. Sean felt her trembling against his chest, heard her whispered prayers that no 7-year-old should have to say. Behind them, Enzo kept 2 fingers on Annabella's neck, counting heartbeats that came too slow, too weak. Baylite Hospital rose against the night sky like a fortress, 10 stories of glass and concrete, floodlights making it glow. The emergency entrance was designed for ambulances, not motorcycles. The bandidos didn't care. They rolled up to the doors in formation, engines cutting one by one until only the echo remained. Sean dismounted, lifting Mia down. Thuram was already unstrapping Annabella, Enzo supporting her head. The automatic doors slid open. A nurse stood in the entrance, young blonde, with a kind of professional smile that died the moment she saw who was coming. Her eyes went wide. Her hand moved toward a phone. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice too loud. "This entrance is for ambulances only. You'll need to." "She's dying," Sean cut in. His voice was flat, factual. "She needs treatment now." The nurse's eyes flicked to Annabella's limp form, then to the leather vests, the patches, the 32 men standing behind them like a wall. Fear and policy warred across her face. Policy 1. "I'm sorry, but this patient is flagged as restricted. I can't." "You can't what?" Thuram's voice was granite. "Watch her die in your lobby." The nurse stepped back. Security appeared, 2 guards with nervous hands hovering near their radios. The standoff lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then a voice cut through the tension like a blade. "They're with me." Dr. Kendra Lopez pushed through the emergency room doors, her scrubs wrinkled from a double shift, her dark hair pulled back, exhaustion carved into her face. But her eyes were sharp focused, already assessing Annabella's condition. She looked at Sean. "Bulldog." "Kendra." No explanations needed. She'd made her calls. Now she was making good on the promise. Kendra turned to the nurse. "Get me a gurney and a crash cart. Now." When the woman hesitated, Kendra's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Move, or I'll have your license reviewed for refusing emergency care." The nurse ran. Within seconds, Annabella was on a gurney, Kendra barking orders to ER staff who materialized like magic. IVs. Oxygen. Blood pressure cuff. The choreography of emergency medicine, performed under fluorescent lights that turned leather vests into strange shadows against white walls. Sean stood at the entrance with Mia on his hip, watching his brothers file inside. The bikers moved through the hospital like an occupying force, quiet, controlled, but unmistakably present. Families in the waiting room stared. Staff whispered. Security guards watched but didn't intervene. Because what were they going to do? Arrest 32 men for bringing a dying woman to the hospital? Kendra worked fast, her hand steady as she checked Annabella's vitals, examined her eyes, palpated her abdomen. When she found the distension, the tenderness, her jaw tightened. "Poison," she confirmed quietly. "Arsenic, maybe." "How long?" 3 days, Enzo said. "We have samples." "Good. I'll need them." She looked up at Sean, and something passed between them, understanding, shared history, the weight of fighting systems that valued profit over lives. "This is going to get complicated." It already is. The fight for justice had entered its second battlefield. And this time, the bikers weren't leaving until it was won. The call came at 11:43 p.m. Sean stood in the hallway outside Annabella's room, watching through the window as Kendra worked. Mia had finally fallen asleep in a chair, her painting clutched against her chest like a shield. The hospital hummed with artificial quiet, machines beeping, fluorescent lights buzzing, the white noise of midnight shifts. Then he heard the voice. Male. Authoritative. Coming from around the corner near the administrative offices. Sean moved silently, boots soundless on linoleum, until he could hear clearly. "Don't care what it takes. The patient in 4B needs to be classified as terminal. Discharge orders for hospice care, effective immediately." A woman's voice responded, uncertain. Dr. Lopez already started treatment protocols. The labs show. I know what the labs show. The man's tone hardened. Which is why we need her out of here before anyone asks questions. This comes from the top. Board level. You want to keep your job. Silence. Then, I'll prepare the paperwork. Sean's jaw clenched. He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over Thuram's contact, when another voice joined the conversation. Maggie Geilinghall. Is it done? Her voice carried that same condescending lilt he'd heard on Trey's phone. The Jones woman needs to be transferred tonight. I have a private facility ready to receive her. Mrs. Geilinghall, I appreciate your concern for the patient's comfort, but I'm not asking. The temperature in the hallway seemed to drop. The Geilinghall Foundation donated $200,000 to this hospital's children's wing last year. I'm sure the board would hate to see that relationship strained. The administrator's response came quickly. Of course. We'll have everything ready within the hour. Sean's hand curled into a fist. He'd heard enough. He moved back to the room where his brothers waited, faces hard in the fluorescent glow. Enzo looked up from his laptop, reading something that made his expression darken. We got a problem, Sean said quietly. Yeah, we do. Enzo turned the screen. Lab results. Toxicology reports. Chemical breakdowns that meant nothing to most people, but everything to a combat medic. Arsenic trioxide. Commercial grade. And look at this, he pulled up another window. The chemical signature matches industrial catering supplies. Specifically, pest control products used in commercial kitchens. Maggie's foundation runs community kitchens, Thuram said. Exactly. Enzo's finger traced the data. This isn't street poison. This is something you'd have access to if you managed food service operations. If you knew which supply closets weren't monitored. Sean's phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number, admin trying to discharge your patient. Hospice transfer. Kendra. Warning him before the axe fell. They're moving her, Sean said. Tonight. Maggie's bought herself a discharge order. The bikers exchanged looks. They'd all seen this before. Power protecting power, money buying silence, systems designed to let the rich bury their crimes. But knowing it was coming and accepting it were different things. Enzo closed his laptop with deliberate care. What do we do? Sean thought about Emma. About hospitals that turned away dying children because insurance hadn't cleared. About administrators who valued donations over lives. About every time the system had failed people who couldn't afford to fight back. We make noise, he said. Thuram, get on your burner. Contact every local news outlet. Anonymous tip, woman dying at Baylight Hospital because charity director is covering up poisoning. Send them the lab results. Send them Mia's painting. Send them everything. Thuram was already dialing. Enzo, lock those files down. Make copies. Send them to every agency you can think of, FBI, state police, health department. Make it impossible to bury. On it. And someone get those cameras in the hallway recording. If they try to move her, I want the world to see. Outside, engines roared to life. The brothers who'd been waiting in the parking lot, keeping vigil, responding to some unspoken signal. Within minutes, Harleys lined the emergency entrance. Not blocking it, that would give security an excuse, but present. Visible. A promise that this wouldn't be quiet. The first news van arrived at 12:17 a.m. Then another. And another. Word spread fast when bikers occupied a hospital, faster still when the story involved poisoning and cover-ups. Camera crews set up across the street, long lenses focused on the entrance, on the leather-clad men standing guard. The crowd formed organically, locals who'd heard the commotion, night shift workers on break, people drawn to drama like moths to flame. They filled the sidewalk, phones out, filming, posting, turning a private crime into public theater. Inside, the tension crystallized into something breakable. Police arrived at 12:34 a.m. For cruisers, lights flashing, parking in a formation that looked less like response and more like intimidation. 8 officers emerged, and Sean recognized 3 of them, men whose names appeared on charity foundation donor lists, whose campaigns Maggie had funded, whose loyalties were purchased and paid for. The lead officer, Sergeant Brennan, thick-necked and mean-eyed, approached the entrance where Thuram stood. 6'4" of tattooed muscle blocking the doorway, arms crossed, expression carved from granite. "Step aside," Brennan said. "We're here on a wellness check." "She's getting well," Thuram replied. "Check somewhere else." That wasn't a request. Wasn't compliance either. Brennan's hand moved toward his belt. Behind him, the other officers spread out, hands hovering near weapons, the body language of men preparing for conflict. The bikers inside moved to the windows. 32 men, watching, waiting. Outside, the brothers by the Harleys stood straighter, engines idling like sleeping predators that could wake in an instant. Hospital security appeared, nervous, uncertain, caught between corporate orders and the reality that forcing this confrontation would end badly for everyone. Thuram didn't move. Didn't raise his voice. Just stood there immovable, his message clear as daylight. You touch her, you touch all of us. The cameras caught everything. Every angle. Every moment. The standoff playing out in real time across a dozen live streams. Thousands of viewers watching as power and principle collided in a hospital hallway at 1 a.m. Sean stepped forward, positioning himself beside Thuram. His voice carried calm authority. Annabella Jones is a patient receiving emergency care for poisoning. Any attempt to remove her from treatment is attempted murder. And every camera out there is watching you decide which side of that you want to be on. Brennan's face reddened. You're interfering with... With what? A woman getting medical care. Sean's smile was cold. Or with someone trying to finish the job they started 3 days ago. The sergeant had no answer that wouldn't damn him. The standoff held. Seconds stretched. The crowd outside grew larger, pressing closer. News helicopters circled overhead, spotlights turning the hospital entrance into a stage. And somewhere deep in the building, Annabella Jones lay unconscious, unaware that her life had become a battleground where justice and corruption were locked in a war neither side could afford to lose. Maggie Geilinghole arrived at 1:14 a.m. like a storm wrapped in designer clothes. Her heels clicked against hospital tile with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. She swept through the automatic doors flanked by her lawyer, a man in a suit that cost more than most people's cars, and trailed by 3 reporters she'd clearly called herself. Camera lights flooded the hallway, turning the standoff into a performance. She held discharge papers aloft like a weapon. I'm here to transfer Ms. Jones to a private care facility that can better serve her needs. Her voice carried artificial concern, the practiced sympathy of someone who'd learned to weaponize compassion. These, gentlemen, are preventing proper medical care. Sean felt Thuram tense beside him. Felt the rage building in 32 men who'd spent the night watching this play out. But he kept his voice level, calm, the eye of a hurricane. You're trespassing, Maggie continued, turning toward the cameras with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. On hospital property. Intimidating staff. Interfering with patient care. I'm simply trying to ensure this poor woman. You're trespassing on human decency. Sean's words cut through her performance like a blade through silk. He stepped forward, and something in his movement made even Maggie hesitate. Not violence. Something worse. Truth. You poisoned her, Sean said quietly. 3 days ago. Brought her soup laced with arsenic. And when she didn't die fast enough, you made sure every hospital in the state would turn her away. Maggie's lawyer started forward. That's slander. That's science. Kendra emerged from the crowd, still in her scrubs, holding a tablet. She moved to the center of the hallway where the cameras could see, where every lens focused on the screen she held up. Toxicology results, she announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent 15 years saving lives. Patient presents with acute arsenic poisoning. Blood concentration of 47 micrograms per liter, well above lethal threshold if untreated. The chemical signature matches commercial-grade arsenic trioxide, commonly used in industrial pest control. She turned the tablet toward the cameras. Numbers. Graphs. Evidence that couldn't be argued with. The kind of poison, Kendra continued, that someone with access to commercial kitchen supply closets could obtain. The kind that causes symptoms easily mistaken for food poisoning. The kind designed to kill slowly enough that it looks like natural causes. The crowd pressed closer. Phones held high. Every word recorded. Every moment immortalized. Maggie's smile faltered. This is ridiculous. I came here out of concern. You came here to finish what you started. Enzo pushed through the circle, carrying an evidence bag. Inside, the soup container Mia had saved. The one wrapped in a grocery bag because a 7-year-old thought they might need it for dinner. The same container that now held the poison that was killing her mother. He placed it on the stretcher beside Annabella's room where everyone could see. Found in the victim's home, Enzo said, his voice flat, clinical. Tested positive for the same chemical signature. And according to the daughter, he gestured toward where Mia stood, still clutching her painting. Delivered personally by Mrs. Geilinghall 3 days ago. Maggie's face went white, then red. That's not, I never. You did. The small voice cut through everything. Mia stepped forward, her bare feet silent on cold hospital tile. She held her painting up with trembling hands, the watercolor and crayon rendering of her mother dying while a blonde woman stirred poison into soup. You came to our house, Mia said, her voice shaking but clear. You said it was an apology. You said the soup was special. Homemade. Tears streamed down her face. She's the one. She hurt my mommy. The hallway went silent. The kind of silence that happens when truth lands so heavily that even breathing feels like disruption. Reporters surged forward. Questions exploded like gunfire. Cameras swung between Maggie's frozen expression and the child's painting, capturing the moment innocence accused power and power had no defense. That's absurd. She's a child, she doesn't understand. Maggie turned toward her lawyer, toward the police, toward anyone who might shield her from this unraveling. This is a setup. These criminals are using a sick woman and her daughter too. She lunged. Not toward Mia, even Maggie wasn't that stupid, but toward the evidence bag, reaching to grab it, to destroy it, to make it disappear the way she tried to make Annabella disappear. Thuram moved faster. His arm came up, blocking her path without touching her, creating a wall of leather and muscle that Maggie bounced off like a wave against stone. She stumbled backward into her lawyer's arms, and in that moment of lost composure, her mask cracked completely. She was stealing. Maggie shrieked, all pretense of compassion gone. From my foundation. She was asking questions, making accusations. Someone had to stop her. The words echoed in the fluorescent-lit hallway. Confession. Raw. Unfiltered. Captured by a dozen cameras and broadcast to thousands of viewers. Sergeant Brennan moved then, not toward the bikers, but toward Maggie. His face had gone carefully neutral, the expression of a man realizing his paycheck wasn't worth being immortalized on the wrong side of history. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with us. Don't you dare. Do you know who I am? How much money my foundation? I know what you just admitted to on camera, Brennan said quietly. And I know I don't get paid enough to cover up attempted murder. His hand found Maggie's elbow. Not rough. Not gentle. Just inevitable. The lawyer tried to intervene. My client misspoke under duress. Your client confessed to poisoning a woman and interfering with her medical care. Kendra's voice cut through the chaos. On camera. In front of witnesses. Including multiple law enforcement officers. Flashbulbs exploded like small bombs. The crowd outside pressed against the windows. News helicopters circled lower, spotlights turning the scene into something surreal, cinematic, the moment when lies built over years crumbled in minutes. Maggie was cuffed. Read her rights. Led away still protesting, still threatening, still unable to comprehend that money couldn't buy her out of this one. Her lawyer followed, already on his phone, already preparing damage control that would never be enough. The reporters remained, turning their lenses toward Sean, toward Mia, toward the painting that had documented a crime and the child brave enough to show it. Who are you? One reporter called out. Sean looked down at Mia, then at his brothers, then back at the cameras. Nobody special. Just people who stopped when a little girl asked for help. The painting, another reporter started. The painting, Sean said, belongs to that child. And it's evidence. But more than that. He picked Mia up, settling her on his hip, the little girl's arms wrapping around his neck. It's proof that sometimes the smallest voices tell the biggest truths. Inside the room, Kendra was already adjusting IVs, monitoring vitals, doing the work that should have been done days ago. She's stable, Kendra said softly. Toxin levels are dropping. She's going to make it. Mia's tears soaked into Sean's leather vest. Not tears of sadness anymore. Something else. Relief. Hope. The first breath after drowning. Outside, engines idled. Brothers waited. The night stretched toward dawn. And somewhere in a holding cell, Maggie Geilinghole learned what every bully eventually discovers, that foundations built on lies collapse the moment someone brave enough speaks truth. Even if that someone is 7 years old and armed with nothing but a crayon painting. The video went viral before sunrise. By 6 a.m., #MIA's painting was trending worldwide. By noon, the footage had been viewed 40 million times. Maggie's confession, the child's painting, the bikers standing guard while truth dismantled lies. News outlets ran it on loop. Social media exploded with rage, sympathy, demands for justice. Charity director arrested for poisoning employee dominated every headline. Sean watched it unfold from a hospital cafeteria, coffee going cold in his hand. Thuram sat across from him, scrolling through his phone with an expression caught between satisfaction and exhaustion. They're calling us heroes, Thuram said quietly. The Hells Angels. The Bandidos. Every outlet. We're not heroes. Sean's voice was flat. We just didn't walk away. That's what makes you heroes, gentlemen. The voice came from behind them. District Attorney Rebecca Chen stood there in a gray suit, looking like she hadn't slept either. She carried a briefcase and an expression Sean recognized, the careful neutrality of someone who wanted to say more than their position allowed. Off the record, she said, pulling out a chair without waiting for invitation. Sean nodded. What you did last night, she paused, choosing words carefully, was legally questionable. You occupied a hospital. Interfered with police. Technically speaking, I could charge half your crew with trespassing. Thuram's jaw tightened. But I won't. Chen's voice softened. Because you did what the system failed to do. You protected a victim when everyone else, including people who were paid to care, looked the other way. She pulled a folder from her briefcase. Maggie Geilinghole is being charged with attempted murder, embezzlement, fraud, and obstruction of justice. Her lawyer's already trying to cut a deal. I'm not taking it. Good, Sean said. The evidence you provided, the soup container, the painting, the financial records, it's all admissible. Your brother Enzo did clean work. She closed the folder. This case is ironclad. She's going away for a long time. What about Annabella? Thuram asked. And the kid? Chen's expression shifted to something almost gentle. That's why I'm really here. She handed Sean a business card. Maria Reyes, Public Defender, Victims Advocacy Unit. Enzo's sister, Sean recognized the name. She's one of the best. Already filed paperwork for emergency housing assistance, victims' compensation, and medical coverage. Annabella won't owe $1 for any of this. And there's a nonprofit offering long-term support, job training, childcare, counseling. Chen stood. Your intervention bought them more than survival. It bought them a future. She left as quietly as she'd arrived. Sean stared at the card for a long moment. Behind him, the cafeteria hummed with morning shift workers, doctors grabbing coffee, families waiting for news. Normal life continuing while his had just tilted on its axis. Upstairs, Annabella had woken an hour earlier. Kendra had been there when her eyes opened, when consciousness returned slowly, confused and frightened. Mia had been sleeping in the chair beside her bed, still clutching that painting, and the first thing Annabella did, before asking where she was, before asking what happened, was reach for her daughter's hand. Baby, she whispered, voice raw from intubation. Are you okay? Mia's eyes snapped open. For a heartbeat, she just stared. Then she launched herself onto the bed, wrapping small arms around her mother's neck, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. You're awake. You're awake. The bikers saved you, Mama. The bikers and my painting and... Slow down, sweetheart. Annabella's hand stroked her daughter's hair, tears streaming down her own face. What bikers? What painting? Kendra explained quietly. All of it. The poison. The blacklist. The 32 men who'd refused to let her die. The standoff. Maggie's arrest. The viral video that had turned a 7-year-old's crayon drawing into a symbol of courage. Annabella listened with an expression that cycled through disbelief, horror, gratitude, and something close to awe. "They did all that," she whispered. "For us." "For you," Kendra corrected. "Because your daughter asked, and they listened." The door opened. Trey Jones stood there, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. His eyes were red-rimmed, his shoulders slumped, shame written across every line of his face. "Anna," he started, voice breaking. God, I'm so sorry. Maggie called me. She told me you were stealing, that you were on drugs, and he couldn't finish. Just stood there, weeping like a man watching his failures play out in real time. Annabella looked at him for a long moment. The man she'd loved once. The father of her child. The person who'd believed lies about her without question. "I forgive you," she said quietly. Trey's head snapped up, hope flooding his face. "But I'm not coming back," Annabella continued. "And Mia stays with me." The hope died. Trey nodded, understanding he'd burned a bridge he'd never rebuild. Can I still see her?" "Sometimes." Annabella looked at Mia, who was watching this exchange with eyes too old for her age. "That's up to her." Mia considered. Then, "Supervised visits. Until you prove you can believe Mama." 7 years old, negotiating custody terms like a lawyer. Trey almost smiled through his tears. "That's fair," he whispered. "That's more than fair." He left quietly, carrying his shame like penance. 3 days later, newspapers across the country ran Mia's painting on their front pages. Not as evidence. As art. As testimony. The crayon and watercolor rendering of her mother dying while a blonde woman stirred poison, recontextualized as a symbol of truth told by the powerless, believed by the unexpected, and amplified until it couldn't be ignored. Art galleries cold. Museums. People wanting to display it, preserve it, turn it into something larger than itself. Mia said no to all of them. The painting stayed with her. Sean received mail at the clubhouse, letters from people across the country. Most were thank yous. Some were hate mail from people who couldn't separate bikers from stereotypes. But one envelope caught his attention. Inside, a letter from the Veterans Healing Foundation. "Mr. McKenna, we were moved by your actions and your crew's commitment to protecting the vulnerable. We understand you've been working on establishing a free food program for homeless veterans. We would like to fund that initiative, $250,000 to start, with additional support as needed. Sometimes the people society fears most are the ones society needs most. Please contact us at your earliest convenience." Sean read it twice. Then a third time. Then handed it to Enzo, who whistled low. "$250,000, Enzo said. That's Emma's Kitchen," Sean finished quietly. The food program he'd been planning for 3 years, trying to fund through benefits and donations that never came. The legacy he wanted to build from his daughter's death. A place where veterans wouldn't be turned away, wouldn't be forgotten, wouldn't die because the system failed them. Now it was real. Thuram leaned over to read, then started laughing. The kind of laugh that comes from exhaustion and relief and the realization that sometimes, impossibly, things work out. "What's funny?" Sean asked. Thuram pointed at Mia's painting, now framed and hanging in the clubhouse. "Kid came to us selling art for her dying mama. Now her art's funding a program that'll save lives." He shook his head. "Looks like she saved us too." Sean stared at the painting, those crayon strokes, those watercolor stains, the child's desperate attempt to document truth. "Yeah," he said softly. "Yes, she did." The sun hung low over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose gold, the kind of sunset that felt less like an ending and more like a promise that tomorrow would come. Annabella Jones stood on the porch of their new home, one hand resting on the wooden railing that still smelled of fresh paint. It wasn't much, a small 2-bedroom rental on the good side of town, with a yard that needed work and windows that actually locked. But it was theirs. Safe. Clean. A place where the walls didn't hold memories of poisoned soup and desperate prayers. Beside her, Mia perched on the porch steps, legs swinging, her bare feet finally healed from weeks of walking hot pavement. She wore a new dress, yellow, with flowers, courtesy of the Victims Advocacy Fund. Her hair was pulled back in careful braids Annabella had spent an hour perfecting that morning. She looked like a child again. Not the small soldier who'd sold paintings to save her mother's life. Just a 7-year-old girl watching the sunset and humming a song she'd learned in school. "You hear that, Mama?" Mia's head tilted, listening. Annabella heard it before she saw them. That distinctive rumble, the deep-throated growl that had once terrified her and now sounded like deliverance. Like cavalry arriving after the battle was won. 32 motorcycles appeared at the end of the street, chrome glinting in the dying light, engines synchronized into a thunder that rolled down the quiet suburban road like a storm refusing to apologize for its power. The neighbors emerged onto their porches, some worried, some curious, all watching as the Bandidos Florida chapter pulled up in front of the small rental house where a woman and her daughter had been given a second chance at life. Sean Bulldog McKenna killed his engine first. The others followed, silence falling like a curtain after the show. He dismounted slowly, pulling off his helmet, and Mia was already running, bare feet slapping pavement, yellow dress flying behind her like a banner. She launched herself at him with the absolute trust of someone who'd learned that sometimes angels wear leather and smell like motor oil. "You came," she shouted, wrapping small arms around his waist. "Said I would." Sean's voice was rough, but his hand on her head was gentle. "Wanted to see your new place. Make sure it's up to code." Thuram stepped forward, grinning. "Code meaning, does it have a working stove so this girl can eat something besides hospital cafeteria food?" "It has a stove," Annabella confirmed, walking down the steps. Her movements were still careful. Healing from poison took time, but her smile was real. "And a kitchen I'm planning to cook in. For people who actually deserve it." The men laughed, that easy camaraderie of people who'd been to war together and survived. Enzo appeared beside Sean, holding something wrapped in leather. He knelt in front of Mia, his expression serious. "We got something for you. Official club business." Mia's eyes went wide. "Official. Very official." Enzo unwrapped the package, revealing a small leather patch, expertly stitched, the craftsmanship unmistakable. 2 words embroidered in gold thread, "Angel Child." Beneath it, smaller, "Bandidos Florida, Honorary." "We voted," Sean said quietly, taking the patch from Enzo. "Unanimous. You showed more courage than most men twice your size. You saved your mama. You spoke truth when everyone else was silent. That makes you one of us." He held out the patch. Mia took it with trembling hands, running her fingers over the stitching, over words that meant she belonged somewhere, meant something to someone. "Can I?" Her voice caught. "Can I really keep it?" "It's yours." Sean helped her pin it to her backpack, the new one the advocacy fund had bought, bright purple with stars. The patch looked out of place and perfect at the same time. "You earned it." Mia threw her arms around his neck, and for a moment, Sean closed his eyes, remembering another little girl. Another time. Another chance he didn't get. But this one he'd saved. Annabella wiped tears from her face, stepping forward. "I don't know how to thank you. Any of you. What you did." "You already thanked us," Thuram interrupted gently. "By surviving. By being here. By giving that kid a chance to be a kid again. And by agreeing to let her keep the painting," Enzo added with a grin. "Do you know how many museums called?" 17, Mia announced proudly. Mama counted. "And you said no to all of them," Sean said, looking at Annabella with something like respect. "Why?" Annabella glanced at the window where, through the glass, the painting hung in a simple frame on the living room wall. That crayon and watercolor rendering of her dying while poison was stirred, recontextualized now not as evidence but as testament. "Because it's not about what it's worth," she said quietly. "It's about what it means. And it means we survived. That truth mattered. That people listened when a child spoke." She looked at the 32 men standing in her yard. "It means angels come in forms we don't expect." Sean felt something tight in his chest loosen. He turned to his brothers, nodded once, and they understood. Time to ride. Engines fired up one by one, that beautiful cacophony of power and freedom. The neighbors were still watching, some filming on their phones, capturing this moment when outcasts and survivors stood together in the golden light of a day that refused to end quietly. Sean swung his leg over his Harley, settled his weight, looked down at Mia one last time. You keep being brave, angel child, he said. And if anyone ever tries to hurt you or your mama again, I know where to find you, Mia finished, touching her patch. Sean smiled. Damn right you do. He turned the throttle, and his voice carried over the engines, not loud but clear, meant for anyone listening. Sometimes justice doesn't wear a badge or a suit. Sometimes it rides in on 2 wheels, carrying a child's painting and a promise kept. The bikes rolled forward, gathering speed, engines roaring like applause from a universe itself. Mia stood on her porch waving, her yellow dress bright against the darkening sky, that leather patch pinned to her backpack like a medal of honor. Inside the house, her painting hung on the wall, no longer evidence, no longer just art. A reminder that the smallest voices can topple the mightiest lies. That courage sometimes looks like a 7-year-old with a crayon. That family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's 32 strangers who stopped because someone asked for help. Like and share this story. Subscribe now for more stories like this. Also check out the 2 videos showing on the screen right now, specially crafted for you.